You're obviously closely invested in the conference final, specifically the Edmonton-Dallas series. I watched these four teams. The Leafs are nowhere close to these guys. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. Look at it's not even playoff struggles or failures. Just look at pure roster construction. Do the Toronto Maple Leafs have a defense core that can compete with any of these four teams that are left standing? No. Do they have the goaltender that's on the same par or level as these four teams? The answer is no. Do they have the star power for sure? Do they have the offensive depth that would put them on the same level? Questionable, but if you're checking one of those three boxes, let's give it to them. That just means you've got a lot of work to do.
So speaking of that, what do you think their MO is this offseason? You talk about the draft as a time when some trades get made, obviously free agency, things can change. What do you think their priority is right now?
I think the priority has to be better balancing this roster. We've been saying this for 7 years now.
Yeah.
I feel like it's that long.
It is.
That's what this group desperately needs. With all due respect to Morgan Riley, he can't be the centerpiece face of your defense core and then have such a severe and stiff drop off between him and everyone else. That can't be the case. I think they know that. It's not just depth. It's also they need more upper echelon talent. And then you can begin to ask the next questions about goaltending.
So yeah, lots to uncover certainly over the next month. I want to get to your release Daily Faceoff's first trade targets board of the offseason. Can you just take us through the process of the amount of time, how everything comes together for the initial list?
Oh, it's a while. It's a bunch of calls to, find out about there's all sorts of names flying around at this time of year, right? Like you hear different things. Some are authentic, some are not. You have to really work through and try and get to as many people as you can. And look, the truth is no one's really saying much about Mitch Marner at all. But you have to connect all the dots, and it's really not that complicated. And I think for Mitch Marner to be number one on our trade targets board, the first question that you have to ask yourself if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs is, are we extending Mitch Marner? That's really the first and primary most important question. I don't know how, after watching these playoffs, after watching playoffs past, you could possibly make the determination that this is someone that's helping you. And my whole thing is, not to make it too black and white, but there's really no gray area for me. If the answer is no when asking, are you helping us win? You got to go. It's as simple as that. I need someone in here, especially at that dollar figure, that's going to help us. And I've yet to see in many years of this team's playoff issues, yet to see him step up and be a true difference maker. And, you can say what you want, and I'm sure some Leaf fan, I don't have your chat up, is saying, oh, but he's close to a point per game in the playoffs. Okay, go look at the two guys in Edmonton. Point per game. Like, come on. Those guys are at 1.6. Those guys are killing it. They're helping the Edmonton Oilers get to a conference final. They have 10 wins. There's 16 required. The Leafs have never gotten past 5. They are at double the level that the Leafs have been in. This is the second time that they've gotten to the conference final. And oh, by the way, the other few times that they've lost to the eventual champion. So it starts, and it's really narrow-minded focus. It is, can you help us win? And again, it starts there, and then you can begin to unravel it after that in terms of the permutations and what happens next.
And that's the kicker, right? Like, at your cap hit, are you helping us? Because people just like, I don't know, you go so deep dive into it, you're pulling apart, contracts and constructing things in your mind, and you have a very large magnifying glass across all different types of players across the league. And when you look at Mitch Marner, are you saying he's a bad hockey player? Everyone's like, oh, he's a good hockey player, we should keep him. That's just such a, that's just such a base, broad view. It's yeah, he's a good hockey player. No one's saying he's not. But with the team that's constructed at his cap hit, with what he gives during the playoffs, which is the hump they're trying to get over, I think people miss that fact. Are we saying he's a bad hockey player? No, but it's at his cap hit with the money that he commands. Is he helping the team being here? And I think after doing that and giving it a real honest look, the answer seems to be no.
So then add in the fact that he would probably be due a raise.
Yeah.
Right.
True. Yeah.
So let's say the next contract, like, we're just pure hypotheticals here. Like, let's say you make the decision that you think he's helping you, which, again, I don't know what evidence you'd point to, but let's say you're like, okay, this is a guy we're going to stick with. So then you say, okay, well, what does that next contract look like? Is it 12 and a half? Is it 13? Whatever it might be. Are they better off having two $6.5 million players? Are they better off having three $4 million players? What is going to make the Toronto Maple Leafs better than just one singular entity? You've got Austin Matthews right now for one more year. You've got John Tavares. You've got William Nylander. How much more do you need? Like, you have to spread the wealth around, which goes back to then solving offensive depth, solving true difference makers on defense, fixing your goaltending. There's a lot that you can do with that money. And instead of sitting in the corner and sucking your thumb and being scared about how tough it's going to be to make a Mitch Marner trade, start thinking the other direction. This happens all the time. And especially, Rosie, this time of year, you'll appreciate this. A lot of people are like, oh my God, the nervous energy in Edmonton going into game 4, they could be down 3-1. It's like, you can look at it that way if you want, or you can look at it like, hey, we're one game away from being all square with the Dallas Stars with a best of 3 to go to the Stanley Cup final and play for a Stanley Cup. Do you want to look at it through the I'm scared lens, or do you want to look at it through what an incredible freaking opportunity we have here to go out and do something? And I look at the trade the same exact way. You can be afraid if you want to, but start thinking about what you can get back and what you can do with that money instead of thinking about, oh, well, he's a good hockey player.
Yeah, they have to take the optimist approach. I couldn't agree more with what you guys are saying. I just think it would be the definition of insanity to roll it back, regardless of the contract and all that. And you make a great point on that. So the process, how do you think a process like this would play out? Is it fair to say sometime over the next month, we're going to get an answer one way or another if this thing's going to go down? The draft's obviously a point and July 1st, right?
I'd say it's before July 1st, because if not, teams are spending that money that they would need to keep open for Mitch Marner. I'd be surprised if something's going to materialize that it's not going to be, before round 1 of the draft. If the Leafs are either getting a top pick back, or if they want to take a top pick and flip it to someone else in order to acquire what they need in the here and now. Like, I don't get the sense that they're going to be sitting back trying to say, oh, well, we're going to try and have our cake and eat it too. Trying to reload for the future. I don't see that. So, I think we're talking about a 27, 28 day period of time between now and then that they've got some really difficult decisions to make.
So what do you think for the Leafs? I mean, how do you think the process goes in their mind? Do they put it out there? Obviously it's out there, and just kind of wait and see what the best opportunity that comes across their plate and jumps on that? Or do you think they specifically target teams? And, we're talking about offensive depth, we're talking about defensemen, we're talking about a goaltender. Do you think they go and attack a certain position? Or do you think they just got to sit there, and in a case like this, the best thing that comes across your desk is what you jump on?
I think it has to be a way more holistic approach. I don't think it's like we need to absolutely kill all of our needs in one trade. I think it's you get a bit of it here, a bit of it there, some of it in free agency, but it has to be methodical. Like, again, to take it back to a current example of just this week, the Oilers made 3 key lineup decisions for game 4. 3 healthy scratches. Every single one of those guys that came in had a reason and a method to how they wanted to play. The Leafs need to have a game plan, which I'm sure Brad Treliving and his staff do, of here are our 3 priorities or objectives. This is them in order. How can we utilize the current roster pieces that we have to go out and try and tackle this? And so think about some of the other draft trades that have materialized in recent years. Like I look at the Montreal Canadiens, they trade a first round pick or get a first round pick in place for a player, then move that first round pick to get Kirby Dach. Like there's always machinations in place where it's like, hey, you take here, give there, and you have to be able to plot like 4 steps down the line, which some managers and staffs are more equipped to do that and others aren't. So it's also like there's a game to it, working multiple lines at one time. And I think Brad Treliving is eminently capable of doing that. It's a matter of beginning those conversations and making tough calls.
Creativity, I think, is the name of the game in this type of scenario, and we know Treliving, again, as you mentioned, is capable of that. Looking, and again, regardless of how you feel about the trade, the Florida and Calgary one was quite a complex one. Do you get the sense that any teams have reached out or made it be known? Like I'm trying to ballpark. We're trying to figure out who could potentially be involved in a deal like this.
Look, I'm sure there's been no shortage of teams that have called and said, hey, if you're moving Mitch Marner, give me a ring. And I'm sure Brad Treliving's jotting those names down in his notebook and is filing it away. I think, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any conversation or, I guess conversation is the right way to frame it, between the Leafs and Mitch Marner's camp. I think they're all still trying to get their ducks in a row. I think the Marner camp is probably spending a bit of time looking at what the market might look like, where it makes sense. If that call were to come in, no one's going to be blindsided. I mean, everyone's seen the coverage. And that's the other part of this, that there is a full no move in place. And I wonder if, at a moment in time when the Leafs got tied up with Kyle Dubas and Brad Treliving this time last year, that they didn't let a big opportunity slip away before that full no move, no trade kicked in.
Yeah, hindsight's 2020. What if you had, in a perfect world, what do you think a return for Mitch Marner would look like, and what do you think they would what do you think would be the most important place to shore up? Goaltending, D, depth scoring, we've talked about. What do you think would be the best help for the Leafs at this point in time?
I'd start by trying to get the best defenseman I can get my hands on.
It's this time of year, man. You're looking at all the teams that are getting it done and that are still playing, and they seem to have that in spades.
And they've got multiple of them. You've got Miro Heiskanen in Dallas, but hey, look at the work that Thomas Harley and Esa Lindell have done this year. You've got it in Florida with Gustav Forsling chipping in a few playoff goals this year. Oliver Ekman-Larsson has had his moments, but then, oh, by the way, there's Ekblad and Montour. And the Rangers, they top to bottom, I think, have the best right side defense in all of hockey. So, look at the Oilers. And this was the point that I made about Darnell Nurse, is he's making $9.25 million. And that is definitely an imperfect contract and a problem for the Oilers moving forward. But they've got Bouchard and Ekholm, and all you're asking for Darnell Nurse to do is hold up his end of the bargain as a number 3. And he, until game 4, hadn't been able to do that so far in these playoffs. So look, they're all 3 to 4 deep, and the Leafs are they've got one of the 4 covered. Is that unfair? Am I being too harsh?
No, that's bang on. I think this team has so much work to do. That's the thing. Like, they're not even close, in my opinion. That's why I was stunned when I heard John Tavares talking about at the end of the year, like, we're close to what?
Close to winning a 5th game? I like, what is that? What does that get you?
Yeah.
No other market is content going into, like, no matter what happens this round, the Oilers are going to feel like this year is a failure. They're not going to sit back and be like, well, we made it to the conference final. That's nice.
Yeah.
The Leafs have never even gotten to that bar and not even sniffed it. So to sit back and say we're close, like close to what? You know, we talked about this right as soon as the season ended. There's this idea that exists that, oh, well, we've run into the Bruins, we've run into the Panthers, we've run into the Lightning. 7-8 years ago, you could say that, but 7-8 years have gone by, and yet no one has looked at you as that team. Why aren't you the 800-pound gorilla that everyone in the Atlantic is afraid of? That's on you.
They're trying to get there. I know. Sometimes I look and I'm like, fuck, a bounce here and there, and they get hot. And then sometimes
losers mentality.
I know.
Yes.
And the Leafs have been losers for a long time. The margins are thin. You got to admit, the margins are thin in the playoffs, especially in the Atlantic, blah, blah, blah. If they tweak something, if they make this Marner move and they tweak something, they get a stud goalie, they get a couple and they get this new mentality of this new coach.
Possible.
Do you think a lot could change overnight, or do you still think they are miles away?
Well, right now they are, but that's because they have the same roster that they had 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the Panthers. When did Bill Zito take over? Late 2021? When did Paul Maurice get hired? 2022? Like, they changed out 3 to 4 of their defensemen. They got Forsling off of waivers. They think of the different machinations that have been in play that have drastically, look at the Canucks. 1 year period of time, they made 9 trades. The Canucks advanced further than the Leafs this year and have won more games in a sort of, hey, we don't have any expectations year than the Leafs have at any point in the Austin Matthews era. So it's entirely possible. And I'm buoyant and I would say bullish on the actual core, some of the core pieces that the Leafs have. But that said, if you're going to continue to smash your head against the cinder block wall, trying to make the same improper balance be balanced, you're never going to get there. You actually have to rip the Band-Aid off and take one of those guys, and it's not even body on the tarmac because it's way more valuable than that. This is taking a true good piece and maximizing your return.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.